Welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the transformative power of naming. When we name something, when we call something into awareness, it's very interesting how that process of calling it into awareness gives it a power to transform. And alternatively, or conversely, it could also end up fixing that concept as something that's static. So we get to look today at the transformative power of naming and how we can use it to catalyze this movement and transformation. So good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. It's good to be here. And before we get started with the transformative power of naming, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub those palms together, feel the friction, the temperature, the tension, the tingling and the tickling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today is talking about the transformative power of naming and really the distinction between naming that catalyzes transformation and movement versus naming that holds something frozen and fixed is presence. And so many of our conversations just really take us back to presence. So by naming something, it enables us to be present to it in a different way, rather than it being a nebulous concept or a nebulous influence that is affecting us in a way that we haven't been able to identify. Being able to name something allows it then to transform, as long as we're not using that name to grasp onto it and make it some kind of reality or static truth. And as an example, let's take a look at some examples here. So this came up because we actually talked about it in my coaching group that I have yesterday, or that I lead yesterday. And in the core connection process, it's really fascinating because once we allow ourselves to be present to something, it then begins to move, because we're in this constant dynamic of change and transformation. That's what life is. It's always changing. We can't really say this is static, this is going to stay this way, and we want to keep it this way. No, we want to allow the ebb and flow and movement and change. So what happened was in one session, I was working with someone, and what occurred for them first was an experience of sadness. Good morning, Robin. So good to have you back with us. Welcome. We're talking about the power, the transformative power of naming. So what the experience was that there was sadness. And then in the core connection process, good morning, Kimberly. So good to have you here with us. This is great. Welcome, everybody. So we're talking about the transformative power of naming. So in the core connection process, it's sort of a process where we go back and forth. You might have a visualization, and then the question is, well, how do you feel? Where's that feeling in your body? What are you aware of? And then by just bringing awareness, and I'm kind of making an equivalency between awareness and naming. By bringing an awareness to something, to the experience, then it gives that experience freedom somehow to move. It's kind of a weird and wild dynamic, but I've witnessed it well over 1,000 sessions with people. So there was sadness, and then by being aware of the sadness began to transform. And underneath the sadness, this person was able to identify and name anger. And in naming the anger, it freed it, it dissipated, it just started moving and dissolving. And sometimes that happens immediately. Sometimes it takes being more present, even more deeply present to it, for it to begin to morph into something else. But I have witnessed this phenomenon over and over again, that that when we presence ourselves to the experience, whether it's emotion or even physical sensation, when we are present to it, and when we call it out, I mean, you don't necessarily have to name it if you're fully experiencing it. And the trick is to be experiencing it without judgment. So it's not like, oh, I'm angry, now I'm upset that I'm angry because I shouldn't be angry, and going off into this other conversation. It's like being present and recognizing, oh my gosh, it's anger. And in naming it, there's an ownership of it. And where, particularly with anger, it's an emotion that many of us are taught to deny. And we're taught to deny anger, like it's more socially acceptable to be sad than it is to be angry. So we often will tend to deny the anger. By naming the anger, by recognizing the anger, then it's given the space then to expand and dissipate and evolve into something else. Particularly with emotions, but also with physical pain. We're energetic beings, so emotion and pain, these sensations are energy. They're congested energy as much as anything else. And so when we can presence ourselves fully to the experience, again without judgment, then that somehow, that attention gives the energy the opportunity to dissipate. Now, on the other side of things, we can also see that naming something gives it a label, or could be giving it a label and having it be something that is then sort of frozen in its conceptualization. So for instance, if I have a label of I'm Let's say I identify myself as stupid. If I have this label of stupid for myself, then that is going, it's going to create a lens through which I experience the world. And that's very different, having a label of stupid, like taking this idea, this naming, and applying it as an identity or as a fixed entity or experience. That is a very different experience than recognizing, oh my gosh, I have this underlying story that I didn't even notice about I'm stupid. Then when we recognize it, then we have the ability to allow it to begin to move. So the difference is using that identification, that naming, to facilitate movement, like facilitate awareness that then allows that to move in its dynamic fashion. Because before it was named or identified, it was all balled up in this amorphous influence. But once it's identified, it has the ability then to be released. It also could then be held on to, and that's what we want to avoid, is the tendency to want to say, oh, okay, now I understand it, I'm angry, like that's who I am, rather than, wow, I have had all this anger that has been influencing me and I wasn't even aware of it. And now I can recognize it. And as I recognize it, it's like giving something room to breathe, and then it changes. Why does it change? Because life is dynamic and we are dynamic beings, and life is constantly changing unless we try to hold on to it and harness it. And so our emotions, this is another thing to be looking at. Maybe we have a diagnosis or something that we're depressed, for instance, and then our identity could become associated with that diagnosis, and then we can be cultivating this whole structure around that, like I'm depressed and I'm always depressed, and then we don't recognize the other elements of our lives that are not in line with that label that we've adopted as an identity. I hope this is making sense. It's a nuance. It's an important nuance to recognize that we can use the power of naming to move, to activate this dynamic of transformation. And at the same time, we can use that dynamic of naming for locking things down. And the locking things down is something that we do to give ourselves comfort and a feeling of safety and predictability. But, because then I know the nature of this thing, but it's not really an accurate reflection of the dynamic of life and the way that things really are always morphing and changing and shifting. So Robin says, you're planting a seed for referring to your person. I have done this and then self-chatted with my higher self. No, you are not said seed character. Ooh, that's a little cryptic, Robin. Let me see if I can understand. So with this naming, if we use it as a label, then what we're doing is we're limiting ourselves. And then what I'm seeing you saying is that's the seed for referring to ourselves, is like trying to figure out, well, who am I so I can fix that, in terms of making something static or solid that I can rely on. But then talking to our higher self, the higher self says, no, 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 that's not really who you are. You're so much more. There may be an aspect of yourself that expresses that part of you, the part that is angry, or the part that is depressed, or the part that or feels angry, feels depressed, the part that fits whatever that diagnosis is. But we are so much more than that. And thank you for that, Robin. Much, much, much appreciated. Kimberly says, I've had all this sadness about my auntie's death. Really, I am upset. She was an alcoholic, and I appreciate you sharing this with us this morning. I'm experiencing this. Yes, so Kimberly, interesting, especially with someone that you so dearly loved and saw them doing things that were so destructive to them, with sadness around someone's passing. My guess is, particularly in this case, there's most likely some anger underneath. And when we can call it out, we can start to make peace with it. Anger at her for not shifting her path and for so deliberately going down a path of destruction. There's probably anger, there's maybe feelings of misplaced feelings of guilt for possibly not being able to get her to do something different when it's not something that someone else can do for someone. Ultimately, we can't change other people. Other people change because they choose to change. So most likely, Kimberly, there's a bundle of emotions there that, as you allow yourself to move into the feeling of it, and this is scary. It's scary to feel the feels, because I know it can seem like if we feel those feelings, we may never come out of it. And believe me, I have had depression in my life that was so extreme that I didn't know that I would ever not feel that way. And I'm here to tell you that I do feel very differently, that I'm not subject to that deep depression. It was suicidal depression. I at one point when I was 40, I decided where I was going to commit suicide. That's how I would wake up and go to sleep just wishing to die, or knowing I would, because nobody could be that sad and continue breathing. So I'm saying this right now because I want to let you know that nothing stays the same forever, unless, even when we try to keep things the same. And it is possible to get on the other side of that kind of deep despair. And it doesn't mean that there aren't times when I become despairing or sad. I do. And it's not in any way like it was. So I'm saying that to offer hope to anyone who is just feeling deeply, deeply despairing, and to recognize that our emotions are not black and white. We're not just sad. We're not just depressed. We're not just anxious. And it's not a situation that is present every moment of every day. We move through all these different patterns, but when we put labels on things like I'm depressed, all we see is I'm depressed, and we don't recognize all the other patterns that are fluctuating throughout the day and throughout our lives. So naming these things can be helpful to give us a broader perspective and to allow for that that transformational movement. Kimberly says, exactly, the emotional stress has been telling me a drunk would avoid the pain. Oh, exactly. The emotional stress has been telling me a drink would void the pain. And I tell myself, old self, get out of there. Kimberly doesn't do this anymore. I'll have 6 months on the 17th. I'm truly grateful for my new path. Kimberly, I can't believe it's 6 months, because I remember when you told us that you were going to rehab. And I can't believe that was 6 months ago. I'm so proud of you. So congratulations. So much honor to you for the path that you've been on and the choices that you're making. And I encourage you to allow your aunt's passing to be a source of strength in your resolve for yourself, and for you to turn things around for you in honor of her in some way, like to honor her through your strength of your commitment. So proud of you for what you've done. Congratulations. Really, really congratulations. Rosalind says, labels and our concepts of roles associated with those labels are different for people in a relationship, like commitment. Oh, like commitment. Yes, exactly. So this is the other thing, is that when we talk about roles and we talk about values and we're communicating with another person, it's really important to share what our definitions are and not assume that we have the same meaning that we attribute to these different things, because most often we don't. We use the same word, but we don't necessarily mean the same thing. So it's very important, particularly in relationship, to be exploring what we mean by certain words, and one of the big ones in relationship is commitment. So thank you for bringing that up, Rosalind. Jenny says, last night I was thinking if I faded away nobody would notice. Jenny, I can tell you that we would notice, and I know that people in your family would notice. And I think it's so important to be able to live our lives for our own fulfillment. And that statement to me indicates that there's more fulfillment for you to be able to have in your life. Because if I'm feeling fulfilled in my life, it doesn't really matter to me if anybody else would notice if I disappear, because I'm living here, I'm being here for the fulfillment of my own heart and soul. And when we live for other people, we can't control how other people think or feel about us. We can't. What we can do is evolve our love for ourselves, our appreciation for our own lives. And so I encourage you to be cultivating that. And as we enrich our own lives, we become more attractive to others as well. And needing others, it's nice to have people who love and care about you, and needing others is something that is, I think people often, unless it's some kind of codependent relationship, people often recoil from the needing from others. It's a repellent force rather than an attractive force. And I'm just hearing a cry from your deepest self, Jenny, to love yourself more fully. Rosalind is applauding what Kimberly said. Oh, let's see. So Kimberly says, oh dear, I'm so thankful you're here. And this is in response to Jenny saying, I'm thinking if I faded away, nobody would notice. And those feelings passed. I know what you're talking about, sending hugs. I'm pushing and rising above. There are lots of good things happening and coming into my life. I'm so thrilled to hear that, Kimberly. That's awesome. Awesome. And Jenny says, I feel nobody cares anyway. And so Jenny, again, around those feelings, I know there were times in my life where I had such deep self-hatred and had very similar feelings to those you're expressing. And I just invite you to find a path to loving yourself more deeply, to self-acceptance. It starts with forgiveness, I think, forgiveness of oneself. And Jenny says it's lonely here. So I'm hearing you, Jenny. Kimberly says, Jenny, we care. Get through these negativity feelings. I'm sending love. Love surrounds. Jenny says, it's hard not having people around. I can't remember the last time I had a hug. Well, I would suggest there are meetup groups, and I think there are meetups that are getting back together in real life now. If you go to meetup.com, that's a way to actually meet people. There's social organizations in our neighborhoods we can connect with. And I suggest that you reach out, find organizations, start building a network of people. I know that when we're sad and depressed, it's easy to just want to crawl more deeply into ourselves. And it takes a monumental effort to step out and become actively engaged with people. But that's what I suggest to you. And in the meantime, I just want to extend a huge, huge, huge virtual hug to you. And Kimberly just said the same thing, virtual hug and lots of love. And Kimberly said, I understand, find some kind of group of people you can connect with. So really, really, Jenny, take the initiative. I know it's really hard, but find some kind of group that you share interests with so that you can start connecting with others. And I think that that's a really important thing to do. Anyway, all, so much love to you and appreciation. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, and at 9 a.m. Eastern on weekday mornings. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.